December 8th. On December 8th, Joaquin was awoken by Mama. She ruffled his hair and said, "Time to get up, Joaquin. It's 7:30 and you start school early today." He sat up in bed, and the first thing he thought of was the magic advent calendar. Mama seemed to read his mind. "But you have time to open the calendar." He thought so quickly that there was room for an awful lot of thoughts before Mama went on. "Aren't you going to open it? I'd like to see it too." "No," thought Joaquin. He couldn't open the magic advent calendar while Mama was watching. "I don't think you're quite awake yet. Perhaps you'll let me open it." "No," Joaquin said. "I'll wait till I come home from school, because then I'll have more time." He jumped out of bed quickly to be certain Mama wasn't going to open the calendar. "Of course, you do whatever you want." She went out to the kitchen while Joaquin got dressed. When he came home from school, a man was standing outside the garden gate. Since he didn't know the man, Joaquin pretended he hadn't seen him. "Is your name Joaquin?" Joaquin stopped on the path that Papa had almost cleared of snow and turned. He was very old, this man, and he looked very kind. All the same, Joaquin didn't like someone he didn't know to know his name, but he had to answer. "Yes, that's me. I thought so." The man came right up to the gate. He was wearing a green felt hat. He had an odd accent. Perhaps he wasn't Norwegian. "You've received a fine advent calendar, haven't you?" Joaquin gave a start. How did he know that? "A magic advent calendar." "A magic advent calendar. Yes, price 75 ore. My name is John, and I sell flowers at the market." Joaquin stood still. In his advent calendar, he'd read about people who had suddenly seen angels. Now it was almost as if he was being visited by an angel himself. He knew this meeting with the flower seller was important, and he wanted to say something serious, but he only managed, "How did you know where I lived?" John chuckled. "Good question, my boy. I often go into the bookshop, you see. I like it there. So I wanted to see hear where the old calendar had ended up. It's a good thing your father forgot his license. If he hadn't, it would have been much more difficult to find you. But I expect you'd have come to see me in the market sooner or later." Joaquin nodded. "Did you know there are some mysterious pieces of paper in the advent calendar?" The old man smiled. "If there's anyone in the whole world who does know that, it must be me. Now you know, too." "Is it homemade?" "Completely homemade, yes, and very old, but that's an old story, too. Have you opened the calendar today?" "No. I have to do it when Mama and Papa aren't looking, because I don't want them to know about the papers. I'm going to wrap them up on Christmas Eve and put the package under the Christmas tree." "Well, that's a good idea," said John. "But what happened yesterday? Did the pilgrims take a sheep with them from the old castle in Finn? And did the angel Ephriel say, 'Fear not,' to the sentries?" Joaquin was almost scared, because John knew all about it. "Did you make the advent calendar?" "Yes and no." Joaquin was afraid John might leave. "Has it really happened, or have you made it all up?" John looked very serious. "It's all right to ask, but it isn't so easy to answer. I wondered if Elizabeth in the advent calendar is the same Elizabeth whose picture was in the bookstore window." "So he told you about the picture." "Well, I have nothing to hide anymore. I'm too old for that now. But it isn't Christmas yet. We'd better talk about Elizabeth another time." He took a step back. "Sabet tabas," he mumbled. "Sabet tabas." Joaquin didn't understand. "I must go now," said John, "but we'll meet again, for that old story links us humans together." Joaquin was annoyed that he hadn't had time to ask more questions. He definitely should have asked whether the big calendar picture was gradually changing as he read the pieces of paper. He hurried into the house and opened the calendar door that said the number 8 on it. Today there was a picture of a shepherd carrying a lamb on his shoulders. On one of the last days of the years, 1,499 years after Christ, 4 sheep, 1 shepherd, 1 king of the Orient, 1 angel, and a little girl from Norway jumped onto a boat that had brought them across the little belt of Jutland. "Thank goodness!" exclaimed Caspar as they stepped onto land. "Yes, it'll be a long time before we have to do that again," said Joshua. The angel nodded nodded. "Verily I say unto you that we will cross the sea only one more time before we get to Bethlehem." Elizabeth had no idea what they were talking about. "Isn't it terribly far to Bethlehem?" "Well, yes, indeed. It's very far and many hundreds of years. But we have only one more sea to cross, and that won't happen until we get to the Black Sea." They came to a town on the inland end of a fjord. At one end of the town was a large fortress. "This town is called Kulding, and is in South Jutland," said the angel. "It has been an important trading center for hundreds of years. The fortress is called Kuldinghus, and the kings of Denmark have often lived here. The time is 1,488 years after Christ's birth." Joshua struck the ground and said, "To Bethlehem, to Bethlehem." They came to the top of the ridge with a fine view over the countryside. Flowers grew everywhere, so it must be early summer. "Look at the lovely wildflowers," Elizabeth pointed out. "They are part of the glory of heaven that is straight down to earth. You see, there's so much glory in heaven that it's very easy for it to spill over." Elizabeth pondered the angel's words and hid them in her heart. Suddenly the shepherd stopped. "A lamb is coming." He needed to say no more, for they all saw the earth had seemingly swallowed up the little lamb with the bell. Where is it? Where is it?" Usually they're so sweet, and their fleece is so white that there's a delight to the eye, but they are also so wild that it's almost uncontrollable. It doesn't always help to put a bell on them. If I'm watching one lamb, the other will suddenly vanish. And when I find the second lamb, all of a sudden the first lamb will decide to leave the flock. Shepherding is a difficult job, and it's especially difficult to herd sheep all the way to Bethlehem. As it is written, "Now I must leave the other sheep to look for the one that is missing." Elizabeth felt her eyes fill with tears. But just then a man appeared over the crest of the ridge, and he was wearing clothes exactly like Joshua's, and on his shoulders he was carrying the lamb with the bell. "He is one of us," said Ephraim. The man with the lamb put the lamb down at Elizabeth's feet. He held out his hand to Joshua. "I am Jacob the shepherd, and the second of the shepherds in the field. Now I'll help to care for the flock that's going to Bethlehem." Elizabeth clapped her hands together, and Joshua struck the ground and said, "To Bethlehem, to Bethlehem." As they passed the old market town of Flensburg, the angel Ephraim said, "The time is 1,402 years after the birth of Christ. We shall soon be crossing the border into Germany and diving into the depths of the medieval ages." Joachim stood lost in thought. The angel Ephraim had said that the wildflowers were part of the glory of heaven that strayed down to earth. Because there's so much glory in heaven that it's easy for it to spill over, probably only a flower seller could write something like that. He didn't tell Mama and Papa that John had visited. If he told them about that, he would have to give away the secret of the scraps of paper too. Joachim now had so many secrets to keep in his head that he felt it might split at any moment. And that's the end of chapter 8.